A gold-backed digital asset can act as a world reserve currency. Now, this idea is coming into the forefront, so the background may already be set. Why I say so? Because the documents and info we are about to go through in this episode will give you the right knowledge to make your investment decision with clear idea. Moreover, it solves many questions and help you reduce your doubts and relax while you make your investment decision based on XRP and which digital asset will be used. That's one of a giant question which can actually arise, right? That is one of the main question, meaning, we actually need documental support to actually solve that one when we come up with it. And what benefit does the central banks have by using this particular asset? We also need documented facts and information to solve that. So that is another area to be considered. Now, those central banks preparing these new infrastructure are using it for what? That should be understood, right? So the upcoming central banks, which are actually going to use this technology, what they are going to intend to do with it, we will actually understand that. And at the same time, what benefit does it provide to the central bank digital currency model compared to the existing legacy system? That should be answered. And as you go forward, you are going to get answers for all of these questions and more information about how things are actually evolving and how it can actually affect the digital asset market. Welcome to the Scientific Investor channel, where we discuss crypto and science behind investing regularly. Now, before jumping into documented facts, I would actually like to give you a background, because when we talk about a gold-backed central bank digital currency or a digital asset which can be used by backing, reserve of a central bank and which can act as a world reserve currency, that is kind of, something replacing the current dollar system, which is the reserve system, right? So when we actually look at this one, say, you can actually see how the new digital dollar will be working. So in this particular CBDC project, when we actually focus on that, you can actually see that it's not actually zooming in. Just a second. Yeah, when you zoom in, you can actually see this. At the top, you will have the central bank digital currency. Now, the treasury produces currency for the Fed, okay, cash or digital. So here in this one, the issuer of the system is here. So that is CBDC. Now, you actually have a retail CBDC, wholesale CBDC, or a synthetic CBDC, or a hybrid version. So that it's different from one to another. And don't worry, we'll actually go through that document and explain how it differs. Now, the next tier is the financial institution, and then the next tier is non-financial institution, meaning common man, digital wallets, and retail transactions. So when you actually look at this, what can you see here? It's reserves, and what mainly showcase here are the trade reserves for cash or digital dollars. So what should be the reserves central banks holding for executing these transactions? Say, considering the current price of gold, it's in an upward trend, and yes, considering the last high of gold, say, was to around 2000, so this time it may actually go around 4000 or 5000 per ounce. So we don't actually know till what height it will go, but still the market total cap of gold is currently around 10 trillion. So even if it doubles, it's only 20 trillion. So that's not actually what is the actual requirement for the entire payment space around the world. Because if you're considering dollar, currently dollar act as a reserve currency. So it's not only about the United States, it's about the world of transaction. So then we can actually see commercial banks in here, regulated financial intermediary and commercial banks who are taking in that digital dollar. Then from that digital dollar, till here it's nothing, it's just issuing. From here it's actually being transacted to the individual digital wallets, conducting the retail transactions and all. So when we actually look at the actual gold backed statement, we need to understand that yes, it should be there or it can be there, the possibilities are there. Now in this particular document from IMF, it actually really talks about, first, the highlight is it's a document which talk about fintech. So you actually have to understand it's not directly talking about CBDC, but when you go to the page number 17, you actually can see stylized CBDC setup, in which you have an end user and CB reserves at one end, which is the claim or hold. So this kind of works based on the current banking network system, which kind of go through the IOUs, right? So if you look at digital assets which can actually provide this benefit to the banks and central banks, you only get one name. We actually went through a lot of research, scientific articles for that, right? Now, the synthetic digital bank currency here, we can actually, okay, I'll zoom in here and we can actually focus on that one because it's actually a bit important to understand that. Allowing e-money providers to hold central bank reserves would be a major policy decisions with various advantages, at the same time risks and potentially far-reaching consequences, such as spurring innovation, enabling the trading of blockchain-based assets, and facilitating cross-border payments. So when they are talking about enabling blockchain-based assets and facilitating cross-border payments, what you have to understand is for central banks, when they talk about this stuff, you really need to understand whenever they talk about digital payments and the cross-border payments precisely, they consider one asset particularly because they have done a lot of proof of works. Considering the current system, they had this, and then they are going to go to this one. If you actually had doubt, you can actually go back and check the video in which we actually went through the Canadian payment system, Payments Canada website, collecting all the information on how it was intending to do that. Now, when we actually compare it with one currency, meaning one nation's currency to another, there's a lot of difference. So when we actually go to the conclusion of this particular document, you can actually see this one. Central bank digital currencies are a new frontier for payments, infrastructure and central banks. So it's actually a new infrastructure. Who's actually talking about implementing a new infrastructure? Now this area, given the geopolitical implications and current US involvement, world leaders in the private and public sectors will need to do what? Explicitly define international values for digital payments ecosystem that protects users and ensures financial stability. So in yesterday's video from Lagarde, Judy Shelton and others, we actually understood that price stability is something which is really considerable. Then establish cross-border collaboration across central banks and government agencies on CBDC design. So who is the private entity working with central banks and governments, regulators, monetary authorities to establish, like giving them or educating them with more and more information about this digital asset infrastructure, creating a CBDC, right? Who is actually doing that now? And bring in other countries currently not exploring CBDC. So who's actually doing this? By just going into their country, getting involved with their regulators. Then why are they actually doing that? So it comes to the next point. Craft clear policies and regulations that delineate the role of private sector and public sector innovation in payment systems. So there should be a precise division between what private sector can do and what public sector are to be doing. Now in this infrastructure here, you can actually understand this is gonna be there because it's not only the commercial banks shown here, it's also regulated financial intermediary. So it can be one of a regulated institution coming in. Now, when they're saying that, they're also exploring private public partnerships to coordinate innovation and ensure that advancements support central bank efforts to manage the monetary system. Now, when we say that, you have to keep in mind on, say, what Bank of England stated after the pilot with Ripple, right? So those idea which they actually received after that pilots, they are implementing that. In yesterday's video, we just saw they're actually going to go in last 1 week based on the updates we have. United Kingdom is actually going in for a central bank digital currency, and it won't be much late till the time they issue that one. So at the same time, we also get other information like other countries are actually going in with this project and they are actually executing that. So when we say that, keep an eye, they are also considering enabling blockchain based asset, for facilitating cross-border payments. So who else is actually talking about cross-border payments? Which company or which organization comes up in the name when they consider cross-border payment? Now this is from American Express, which is a reputable institution around the globe, right? And they suggest this one here: the future of cross-border payments, Ripple versus Swift. Think Swift is a legacy system which is there from 30-40 years, say 4-5 decades, at least 40-50 years they are here, and they are comparing it with an organization which is not even surpassed a decade, but they actually reached till IMF, BIS, World Bank, majority of the huge central banks or the key central banks around the world. So if they actually did that in 5-6 years, you can imagine what's actually come in. And if you can't imagine, try to imagine what is coming, because the documents we are going through actually shows you the use case which Ripple actually pointed out. Like, we are going to dominate this particular use case, and they're actually doing that in reality, right? And at the same time, we are actually seeing this Global Government Forum shows this one, like in the payments and financial services area, regulators set out steps to boost cross-border payments. Now, if they are actually going on their own previous legacy system, then they don't actually need new regulations. If they are going to use new ideas, then they need a new regulation. Now, when they are highlighting here this particular document, enhancing cross-border payments, building block of a global roadmap, we actually went through that previously. Now, that was from the Bank of International Settlements. Now, whenever these organizations or regulators or others are talking about new regulations, or at least implementing regulations for digital pay assets which can be used for cross-border payments, they all come back to the IMF, BIS or World Bank documents. Now, we actually went through those research publications issued by BIS, IMF and all, and we understood one thing, right? The chances for a synthetic central bank digital currency is, high. Because why? It actually allows the central banks not to actually, kick out the commercial banks from it. So the commercial bank is still in the place. It's not being kicked out. They are not, directly issuing the retail central bank digital currency and going against the existing one system. So if you read here, a more immediate consequence stands out: the creation of central bank digital currency. After all, if e-money providers can hold and transact in central bank reserves, if these are protected against other creditors when the e-money providers go bankrupt, and if e-money is issued 1414 reserves, then e-money holders too can essentially hold and make transactions in central bank liability. Now, when we say liability in the current, environment, it is really important, because if we look at just this one, look at the balance sheet of Canadian Central Bank, how it actually went sky high. So they are talking about gold backed digital asset. Then in reality, we are seeing some of the central banks who don't even own gold, say Bank of Canada. They're, if they hold gold, it's negligible amount of their balance sheet. That is a truth, and it's one of a country which the world looks at as a developed nation, right? So when we actually consider that, you actually don't need to forget this one. They are also considering the liabilities. Now, in a previous document, which details the technicality of central bank digital currency in a synthetic form, it talked about this will be something which will be issued by a private entity, which will be backed by the central bank's liabilities. Now, if you need confirmation for that, we actually went through in that detailed manner in a previous video talking about central bank digital currency. If you look at our Scientific Investor channel, you can actually see, you heard it here as the thumbnail of that video, so you can get that easily. Now, this version of CBDC is not full-fledged type discussed at length by policymakers, the retail CBDC. It's something which is different. In that version, central banks are the major CBDC operators responsible for many of the following steps. So in that version, meaning not this version, right? So performing customers due diligence, offering or vetting wallets. So as we just saw, there will be wallets included for the retail payments. So developing and selecting the underlying technology, offering a settlement platform, managing customer data, monitoring transactions. So everything related to that payments were actually to be monitored and executed and implemented by the central banks in the other versions. But in this version, these can actually be conducted by some institution which central bank allows, right? So what are these? Wallets. They are to provide wallets, and they are to provide the underlying technology. They are to provide the settlement platform, managing customer data, monitoring transactions, and interacting with customer requests, complaints, and questions. So when we actually see this major area of this one, which is based on the technology side and settlement side, you can actually see the transaction, settlement, and technology is offered by Ripple to the central banks, right? So this is in front of us. So if we don't understand that, then that's kind of something different. So when you come here and see central bank digital currency, and if you haven't watched our previous video in which we went in depth about that, this is a short area for that. The term synthetic does not imply that the underlying assets, in this case reserves, are not needed. So that means, like the central bank digital currency CBDC, this one also needs reserves. So that is the central bank reserves. Now when we actually talk about this one, yes, it is worthwhile because majority of the central banks around the world now have a lot of gold. Considering US, yes, it has a lot of gold. Then if we take 10 of the top gold holding countries, you can see from US to up to India and other countries. So these can actually implement a payment system based on their gold holdings and their liabilities. They can actually come up with a new system supporting the current monetary system, so that the current monetary system itself is not completely disrupted. So that actually brings them into this point. Central bank digital currency is thus far a cheaper and less risky model for central banks. So when central banks are considering their cost and benefits and associated risk for implementing this technology, for them this is the best option. So which option will they actually go in for? Will they go in for a retail central bank digital currency? Will they actually go in for a wholesale central bank digital currency? Or will they actually go in for a hybrid version like synthetic one, which can actually act as both? So that is the area where you can actually understand that this is going to happen, and there is no doubt about that, because the Bank of International Settlement survey actually showed you 70% of central banks are engaged in work of this one. And if we are to neglect that, you can't actually neglect that, because this is going to be the future, because the central banks are the core or the custodians of payments. They does that settlements. So the financial centers of the world see emerging markets up for grabs in the competitive expansion for cross-border digital payment networks. So if emerging market is actually getting involved and implementing these, the Western or the developed won't actually wait. So when we actually see these nations coming out and using this, now, yeah, I have 3 articles based on this one, and it kind of gets me, step ahead, one step back, one step ahead. But still, one thing is for kind of sure. The central bank payments news actually shows Bank of Thailand has entered 3rd phase of development of a central bank digital currency and plans to expand its use among large businesses. Meaning, when we come back here, you can actually understand that the commercial banks and others. So that is kind of the wholesale area of a central bank CBDC. So it's being implemented, right? Now, we can actually jump into the next area of the video, which is kind of talking about, say, for example, we are seeing this use case and one country and after another country going in with this. Don't actually forget that this is happening because they have the major interest in it. They have the major benefit for using it as a central bank payment system, which can be used for cross-border payments, because the domestic payments is not having that much friction in every different markets. So the central banks are more concentrated on what? The cross-border aspects. Now this one from XRP Yo-Yo actually suggests, Ripple says it's exploring the DeFi area, and here's how the XRP cloud can actually come into this craze. And remember, when this is the craze, meaning majority are actually moving into DeFi platforms, trying to implement something new. XRP ledger is something on which, it's an open source, so everyone can actually come in, and if they have the talent and the potential to do that, they can implement a new project which, have that ability to survive. Now, at the same time, when these new products are coming in, what you have to understand is the money actually goes in where the smart money moves, because that means, simple thing is, when there are developers, when there are professionals working on a platform and it is getting increased network activity with production, implementation and actual progress, money is actually moving in there. If you understand that or not, in reality it's actually happening. So now we actually see world's wealthiest are dumping stocks. How this can actually impact the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency area. Now, when they highlight Bitcoin, this is Bitcoiners, so they kind of go that way instead of saying the digital asset or cryptocurrency. But in Forbes, when you jump into the Forbes, you actually get the same kind of a dip, same idea, same theme, but in a different words. Stock market crash 2020. Welcome to the end game. So that means there is something which is going to happen, and that's going to be so bad. And if the smart money, as we call smart money, right, they actually foresee this and they understand this. So when the market is kind of making new highs and going in for the distribution area, they kind of take out their profit and slowly get out of the market. Now, when they take these profit and get out of the market, they don't actually go fully in cash and wait for decades. That's based on Warren Buffett and all. Not everyone does that, but still they actually see an new market, new asset class which is coming up. And if the central bank digital currency is coming up, that was the previous question. Now the central bank digital currencies are coming up, so this market is gonna be the light or the sun of the investment area. It will be burning for upcoming centuries, that's for sure. And then these kind of thing actually happen, which kind of shadows the entire ecosystem. But keep in mind, when these happens, the positive thing about this is the regulations will come soon. The central banks, regulators and the monetary authorities dealing with this, they will actually come in. They will push, the all the regulatory requirement which they need, like the anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism acts, all related stuffs they will actually go through. So one aspect, it's actually good, but some of them actually lost their money. Whenever you see some kind of stuff like this, someone is going to give you, you send one BTC, they send you two. It doesn't actually work that way. So keep in mind on that and be brave. Don't send your hard-earned money, whether it's invested in an asset or not. Don't send it to another guy. You don't need that. Now, at the end, I would actually like to show this one. Price predictions, and this is going to happen, that's going to happen by this particular time. We don't actually have a crystal ball to say this is going to happen this particular day. And if we say that, that becomes something like this. Why we need to actually go through these kind of issues, right? So instead, what we do in the scientific investor family is go through the facts, go through the documented ideas and try to find the dots in between. Like we actually said here, this is the key area for me, which kind of, strikes again and again and again. Central banks are going to use a technology provider to use their settlement platforms and to monitor transactions, interacting with all different areas of their customers. Meaning central banks, their customers would be commercial banks, and these banks, if they are on a network like RippleNet or at least Intelligent Protocol, the monitoring of transactions can be actually done. It's easy, right? It's all documented. So when we actually see these kind of fundamentals, and at the same time, in this one, say for example, the central bank reserves are going so high, meaning just during this health crisis, it's went up 350%. That is so huge, right? Now these liabilities has to be backed up in one way or the other. And there are central banks like this who don't have much of a gold. So when we look at central bank digital currency, it should be something new, which we were discussing like previously. It supports the central bank liability. So digital asset could be backed by gold as a world reserve currency, as a replacement of the dollar. So here it really comes, and I kind of agree with this. There can be one or two change, slight modification in the technical aspects, but this is here. Whether you agree with it or not, it is here. Now it's your choice to whether understand it and invest accordingly, or just wait in the sidelines, or go against it. I hope you guys actually received value from the video, and if you want to support the channel, please do hit that like button. And as I told previously, just when I ask for the support, majority supports in the sense, majority means only 10 to 12% of the total viewers here hit that like button. So even in that 10 to 12%, majority, say 7 to 8%, hit that like button when I ask. So now this is our family, so it's my responsibility to ask you guys. So again, I request you guys, if you actually received value from the content, and if you actually look forward to similar videos which can provide value for your time, do support the channel, hit that like button, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button please. I'll meet you guys on the next video. Bye for now.